Hello and welcome to Boring History to Sleep 2. Tonight we'll be exploring the development of paper manufacturing techniques in early 19th century Northern Europe. For the next 30 minutes, you can simply relax, close your eyes, and let the gentle rhythm of industrial history lull you into peaceful rest. There are no tests, no exciting plot twists, no dramatic revelations, just the slow, methodical progression of manufacturing processes from 1800 to 1850. So get comfortable, adjust your pillow, and let's begin with the state of paper production at the turn of the 19th century. In the year 1800, paper was still made primarily from cotton and linen rags. The collection of these rags was a carefully organized yet unremarkable industry. Rag collectors would travel from town to town, purchasing used clothing, worn bed sheets, and discarded textiles from households. These collectors, often called rag and bone men, would sort their collected materials into various grades based on fiber quality and color. White linen rags were the most valuable as they produced the finest quality writing paper. Cotton rags were also acceptable, though they required slightly different processing techniques. The sorted rags would be stored in large warehouses near paper mills, sometimes for months, allowing them to partially decompose, which interestingly made the fibers easier to process. This storage period, known as retting or rotting, involved carefully controlled moisture levels and temperature to prevent complete deterioration. Workers would check the rag piles weekly, turning them to ensure even decomposition. The smell of these warehouses was reportedly quite unpleasant, though workers became accustomed to it over time. Once the rags reached the proper stage of decomposition, they would be moved to the cutting room, where workers using large shears would cut them into pieces, approximately 2 inches square. This cutting process was done entirely by hand, and a skilled worker could process about 40 pounds of rags per day. The cut rags were then washed in large vats of water, sometimes heated, to remove dirt, grease, and remaining dyes. This washing process could take several hours, with workers stirring the rags using long wooden paddles. After washing, the rags were spread out on drying racks in well-ventilated rooms to dry slowly over the course of 2 to 3 days. The next stage in paper production involved the Hollander beater, a machine invented in the Netherlands in the late 1600s, but perfected throughout the early 1800s. The Hollander beater was a large oval tub, usually made of stone or later metal, measuring approximately 12 feet long and 4 feet wide. Inside this tub, a heavy roller fitted with metal bars rotated slowly against a fixed metal plate, also fitted with bars. The dried rags were placed into the beater, along with water, creating a thick slurry. As the roller turned, powered by the water wheel, the rags would pass between the rotating bars and the fixed plate, being gradually shredded and macerated into individual fibers. This process, known as beating, could take anywhere from 4 hours to 12 hours, depending on the desired paper quality. The speed of the beater was carefully controlled, typically 15 to 20 rotations per minute, creating a steady, rhythmic sloshing sound that would echo throughout the mill. Workers called beater men would monitor the process, checking the consistency of the pulp by hand every 30 minutes or so. They could determine the proper consistency by the feel of the fibers between their fingers, a skill that took years to develop. The beating process not only separated the fibers, but also slightly frayed them, creating tiny hair-like projections that would later help the fibers bond together in the finished paper. Different types of paper required different beating times. Writing paper needed longer beating, perhaps 8 to 10 hours, to create very fine, smooth fibers. Wrapping paper or other coarse papers might only require 4 to 5 hours of beating.
Very good.
During the beating process, various additives might be introduced. Sizing agents such as rosin and alum were added to make the paper less absorbent, allowing it to accept ink without bleeding. These additives were measured carefully using wooden scoops and added at specific intervals during the beating cycle. The beater men would record in ledger books the exact amounts of each additive used, the beating time, and the water temperature, creating detailed records of each batch. Once the beating was complete, the pulp, now a thick, creamy consistency resembling porridge, was ready for the next stage of production. The vat room was the heart of the paper mill, where the actual sheets of paper were formed. This room was kept at a constant temperature, typically around 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and maintained at high humidity to prevent the pulp from drying prematurely. In the center of the room stood large wooden vats filled with diluted paper pulp mixed with water in a ratio of approximately 1 part pulp to 99 parts water. The vat man, the most skilled worker in the entire mill, stood at this vat holding a mold. This mold was a rectangular wooden frame with a screen made of closely spaced wires stretched across it. The process was deceptively simple, yet required tremendous skill and years of practice. The vat man would dip the mold into the pulp mixture at a precise angle, lift it horizontally, allowing the water to drain through the wire screen. As the water drained, the fibers would settle onto the screen, forming a thin, even layer. The vat man would then shake the mold with a specific motion, side to side, then front to back, causing the fibers to interlock and bond together. This shaking motion, called the shake, was the true art of paper making. Too little shaking, and the fibers wouldn't bond properly. Too much, and the sheet would be too thin or develop holes. An experienced vat man could produce a sheet of paper approximately every 20 seconds, working steadily for hours. A typical work shift in the vat room lasted 8 hours, during which a skilled vat man might produce over 1,000 sheets of paper. Once the sheet was formed, the vat man would pass the mold to his assistant, called the coucher, a French word meaning one who lays down. The coucher would carefully flip the mold, pressing the wet paper sheet onto a piece of felt. This transfer required perfect timing and pressure. Too much pressure, and the delicate sheet would tear. Too little, and it wouldn't release properly from the mold. The felt with its wet paper sheet was then stacked
keep this
onto a
on
growing
peaceful
pile
for a
called a
minute. I'm working on
post.
making a
Between
blaze
each
farmer.
sheet of paper
Blaze farm,
was a sheet
since-
of felt, creating an alternating stack of paper, felt,
Not that simple
paper,
when you know it.
felt, sometimes over 200 layers high. This process continued hour after hour, with the vatman and coucher working in perfect rhythm. Dip, shake, transfer, dip, shake, transfer. An almost meditative repetition. The only sounds in the vat room were the splash of water, the creak of the mold, and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the workers. Once a post of approximately 200 sheets was completed, it was ready for the pressing room. The entire post, still alternating paper and felt, was placed into a large, heavy press, usually made of wood, or later, in the 1830s, of iron. This press, operated by turning a large screw mechanism, or sometimes by a hydraulic system, would apply tremendous pressure to the entire stack. The pressure gradually increased over a period of about 30 minutes, forcing most of the water out of the paper and into the felt layers. This initial pressing, called the first pressing, would remove approximately 60% of the water. After the first pressing, the post was carefully disassembled sheet by sheet, with each paper sheet separated from its felt. The felts, now saturated with water, were hung up to dry and would be reused the following day. The paper sheets, still damp but now able to hold their shape, were then restacked, this time without the felts, just paper sheets separated by smooth boards. This new stack was pressed again, in what was called the second pressing, with even greater pressure applied more quickly, removing another 20% of the moisture. After the second pressing, the sheets were taken to the drying loft, a large, well-ventilated room, usually on the top floor of the mill. Here, workers called loft men would hang each individual sheet over horizontal cords, similar to a clothesline, stretched across the room. The sheets were carefully arranged so they didn't touch each other, allowing air to circulate freely around each one. Depending on the weather and humidity, the drying process could take anywhere from 2 days to a full week. The loft men would walk through the drying room twice daily,
The biggest beefsteak.
checking the sheets and rotating their positions to ensure even drying. In winter months,
Keep this
small
on
stoves
peaceful
might be
for a minute.
used to
I'm working on
maintain
making a
temperature,
blaze farmer.
though too much
Blaze
heat
farm.
could cause the paper to become brittle. In summer, windows were opened, allowing natural breezes to circulate, though sudden rain required quick action to close the windows and protect the drying sheets. Once fully dry, the paper sheets were removed from the cords and inspected one by one for defects. Sheets with holes, uneven thickness, or other flaws were set aside to be recycled back into the beater, while perfect sheets moved on to the finishing room. The finishing process gave paper its final characteristics, particularly its ability to accept ink without bleeding. Dried sheets were first sized by being dipped into a bath of gelatin, made from animal hides and hooves. This gelatin sizing filled the tiny spaces between paper fibers, creating a surface that would resist liquid absorption. The sizing bath was kept at a specific temperature, around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, warm enough to keep the gelatin liquid, but not so hot as to weaken the paper fibers. Workers, using wooden tongs, would dip each
Keep this
sheet,
on peaceful
hold
for
it
a
for
minute. I'm
exactly
working on making a
5
blaze
seconds,
blaze
then
farm.
lift it out, allowing excess sizing to drip back into the vat.
Not that simple when you know it.
After sizing, the sheets were hung again to dry, this time for only 1 day, as the gelatin layer dried more quickly than the paper itself had initially. Once the size sheets were dry, they were taken to the pressing room once more for a final pressing. This third and final pressing was done with heated metal plates, which gave the paper a smooth, polished surface. The pressure was applied evenly and steadily for approximately 10 minutes per stack. After this final pressing, the sheets were counted and sorted by quality. First quality sheets, those with no visible defects and perfect uniformity, were packaged separately from second quality, which might have slight imperfections. The counting process was done by hand, with workers counting out reams of 500 sheets each. These reams were then wrapped in protective paper and tied with string, ready for shipment to stationers, printers, and other customers. The entire process, from rag collection to finished paper, took approximately 3 to 4 weeks and involved dozens of workers, each performing their specific task in this slow, methodical, centuries-old process. A typical paper mill in the 1820s operated 6 days a week, from dawn until dusk. The mill employed perhaps 30 to 40 workers, each with specialized roles. The workday began at sunrise, when the mill supervisor would ring a bell, signaling workers to begin their shifts. The water wheel would be engaged, slowly turning the various mechanisms throughout the mill. The Hollander beaters, the pressing screws, all moving at their steady, unchanging pace. Workers would take their positions at their respective stations, and the daily rhythm would begin. Meals were taken in shifts to ensure the mill never stopped operating during daylight hours. The consistency, the repetition, the unchanging nature of the work created a kind of industrial meditation. And so, day after day, week after week, month after month, the mills produced paper using these same methods, these same careful, deliberate, unhurried processes. There were no dramatic innovations during this period, no revolutionary changes, just the steady, reliable, predictable production of paper. And with that, we conclude our exploration of paper manufacturing from 1800 to 1850. I hope you found this relaxing, and perhaps you're already drifting off to sleep. Rest well, and thank you for listening to Boring History to Sleep To.
Fashion designers
Good night.
to